The wind moans low across the crumbled battlements, threading through shattered stained glass like a ghost recalling liturgies once sung beneath vaulted ceilings. The stones remember. Beneath moss and frost, beneath the weight of centuries, memory clings, not as words, but as wounds. This was once Eldhara. Eldhara. The name passes the lips like incense over cold altars, a place that once rang with swordplay and songs, where kings knelt before altars and lovers pressed hands beneath moonlit towers. Now it is hollow, not conquered, but abandoned. A kingdom that did not fall, it faded. There was no final battle, no blaze of glory etched into bardic verse, no rain of arrows, no clash of steel. Only the black rains came, slow, relentless, unholy. They fell without sound, turning earth to sickness and breath to ash. Within the great hall of Eldenfast, the royal family waited for deliverance. The king, Ulrich IV, sat slumped in his high-backed throne, crown askew, fingers blue, eyes fixed on a distant mercy. His queen lay curled beside their youngest son, lullabies dried on her lips. Crimson drapes, once meant for ceremony, now shrouded the dead in velvet stillness. No courtier remained, no priest dead crossed the threshold. Only one soul endured, the steward. His name is lost. Only his final act remains. He took the iron key, turned it once, twice, then sealed the gate with black ribbon, a mourning knot, and vanished into the mist like a man walking into myth. A single candle burned on the altar behind him, its wax weeping down the stones like the final tear of a forsaken god. And so Ealdhara died, not in fire, not in glory, but in breathless silence. The seasons turned, indifferent. Ivy crept over stained glass saints, roots clawed through nursery walls. Wolves denned where ministers once whispered secrets. The great bell of the keep fell through rotting rafters and shattered the marble below, its ring echoing for hours, then never again. But kingdoms do not truly die. They dream. Travelers speak of it, not with certainty, but in murmurs around fires. Some have camped near the ruins and woken with tears they cannot explain. Others swear they heard bells tolling beneath the earth. Too slow, too mournful to be real. One old hunter swore a woman in silver lace stood at the edge of his vision all night, singing to the trees in a language his bones understood, but his mind could not name. Scholars dismiss it as superstition, but the ground tells a different story. Beneath the soil, the bones lie tangled, not from battle, but from desperation. Some curled together like lovers, others clawing at unseen doors. A child's toy rests in a cradle of withered heather. A carved knight, legless, blind-eyed, clutching a splinter of wood like a sword. He never saw the sunrise. What curse claimed them? Was it plague? Was it penance? The scribes who might have recorded it were among the first to fall. The scrolls charred or sealed, away. But one remains, they say, deep beneath the throne, sealed in wax, never read, its message written in a dying hand. Perhaps it is nothing, perhaps it is everything, because loss lingers. It clings not only to stone and ruin, but to the air itself. In Ealdhara, time has thickened. Fog moves too slowly. Birds do not sing. The moss has grown over pews and chalices, but also over memory, and memory, like moss, has roots. Even now, in the waning light of autumn, you can stand at the gate and feel it, a breath colder than wind, a pressure behind the ribs. Something watching, something remembering, and always the silence, a silence deeper than any tomb, not empty, but full of what was once believed, once vowed, once loved. For this was a land of oaths. Knights once stood beneath these vaulted heavens and bled for ideals we no longer understand. The winter vow, they called it, a promise made when the stars burned blue and the wind turned bitter. Hold fast, even unto ash. Those words are etched into the last remaining archway, half covered in ivy and thyme. And perhaps it is those very words that keep the ruin standing. Hold fast, even unto ash. But no hand holds the sword now. No banner lifts in the cold morning light. The banquets are dust, the scriptures faded, and yet, beneath it all, something waits. Eldara is not gone. It is dreaming. And what dreams lie beneath the stone? Some say a queen still walks there, veiled in moonlight, her face hidden but her voice carrying lullabies through broken cloisters. Others speak of a fire that never extinguished, somewhere deep within the catacombs, a sacred flame guarded by those who never left. Monks turned wraiths, children turned shadows, the faithful made eternal by sorrow. But perhaps the truth is simpler and more terrible. Perhaps Eldara was not cursed, but forgotten. Forgotten by the world, by history, by the very gods it once served. And in that forgetting, it unraveled, thread by thread, until only silence remained. The kind of silence that echoes louder than screams. So what remains of a kingdom that dies without witness? A pewter goblet kissed by frost. The scent of sage burned in sorrow. A scroll never read, and a throne, worn smooth by time, now crowned by ivy. Untouched, unclaimed. But there are those who still listen, who still wonder. What lay written in that final message? What prayer, what confession, what truth sealed in wax by a trembling hand? Perhaps the next chapter waits beneath stone and silence. Perhaps something is stirring. The mist gathers now. The raven lifts from its perch. The last of the candle's wax hardens into a crimson tear. Somewhere, beneath all this ruin, a heartbeat lingers. And soon, something will answer. Snow falls soundlessly over the abandoned throne room of Istravia. The flakes settle like ash on velvet stone. A quiet funeral that never ends. Moonlight filters through the shattered rose window, casting fractured light across the marble floor. There lies the scepter, once grasped by hands trembling with reverence, now crooked and cold beneath a veil of dust. The gold is dulled, the engraved symbols, wheat, flame, river, worn smooth as bone. It is as if the gods themselves turned away, and with their silence, Istravia began to die. Beyond the throne, wind slips through the ribs of the broken cathedral roof. It moans like a widowed queen, carrying the scent of scorched cedar and crumbled parchment, the remnants of prayers once whispered in desperation. In a dark alcove, half swallowed by shadow, lies a child's slipper, fur-lined, embroidered, a lion's mane unraveling into soft threads like time forgetting. Here, even ghosts seem afraid to linger. This is where belief bloomed into ruin. Alric the Devout had once been a king of quiet piety, a man who knelt longer than he ruled, who lit candles for stars not yet risen. But when his queen bled near to death in childbirth and yet bore a daughter with breath as light as snow, he proclaimed her divine. A sign, a savior. He named her Seraphine, of the angels. And the bells of Istravia rang for 7 days, echoing through mountains and down into river valleys like a call to the heavens. But the rains did not return. First, the wheat bent brown. Then the river pulled back like a frightened serpent. Granaries whispered with emptiness. Livestock wandered fields of dust, and still Alric prayed. Louder, longer, harsher. He ordered golden mosaics of his daughter in every chapel, her halo larger with each depiction. He clothed her in white even as the people clothe themselves in burlap and grief. And when the rumors began, murmurs of punishment, of divine wrath, of pride mistaken for faith, he silenced them with sermons and steel. He was not a tyrant by design. He was a father desperate to believe the cradle he watched over wasn't the cradle of his doom. And Seraphine, she did not cry, not once. Nurses said she blinked too slowly, that she touched every rosary as if it were already hers, that she spoke to shadows when no one was looking. By the third failed harvest, the city began to empty. Not with revolt, but with reverent flight. Noble families fled in silence, leaving gates ajar, meals half-eaten, prayers unfinished. Dust settled in ballrooms where violins still lay in mid-song. Monks marched through streets of cracked stone, swinging censers heavy with myrrh, their chants clashing with the wails of the hungry. Statues of saints wept from mildew and cracked marble. The nights grew louder. Wolves, they said, or worse. Then, one winter's eve, the castle bell rang once, and never again. The final departure was not marked by banners or drums, but by a figure in white, the child princess, Seraphine, swaddled in silence. She was carried down the snow-laced mountain by a mute knight whose name was never known, whose vow of silence was never broken. His armor was scorched, his sword untouched. Behind them, the wind keened like morning steel, and high above, the bell tower caught fire. Some say her veil brushed a torch as they passed and went up like parchment. Others say no fire touched her, and that what burned was not fabric, but illusion. A holy lie unraveling into smoke. They vanished into the woods, trees tall as cathedrals, dark as forgotten sins. Tracks disappeared beneath the snow, only the humming remained. A tune, soft and strange, echoing through branches. A lullaby in no tongue ever written. And then, silence. The silence of Istravia is not that of a battlefield long past, nor a grave sealed by time. It is the silence of a question never answered. What if the miracle was never meant to be born? In time, pilgrims came, to peer into the ruins, to touch the cold scepter, to see the lion slipper curled like a forgotten prayer, but none stayed long. Birds do not sing there, leaves do not rustle. Even the wolves tread lightly, as if the forest itself remembers. Some say Seraphine became the forest's ghost. A pale child with no footsteps, seen where the snow falls thickest. She does not speak. She only watches. And when she vanishes, a warmth lingers, like breath against frost. Others say she lives still, untouched by age, hidden in a cloister of frost and bark, fed by roots and silence. But the oldest tellings whisper something else. That Seraphine was never a savior, that she was never even a child, that the gods, angered by Alric's presumption, shaped a lesson in flesh, a mirror of hubris swaddled in innocence, that her silence was not holiness, but absence, that her unblinking gaze was not wonder, but judgment. And so Istravia fell, not by steel, nor siege, nor sin of greed, but by love weaponized as prophecy. Alric believed in miracles, so deeply he forgot the hunger of his people. He forgot the land needs water, not worship. That hope must walk alongside reason, not float above it in white silk. In the end, he gave his kingdom to silence, to a silence so absolute it devoured prayer, throne, and name alike. The snow continues to fall. It softens the jagged stones. It buries what should not be remembered and preserves what cannot be forgotten. Somewhere in the woods, beneath pines older than memory, a melody stirs. It is not joyous. It is not mournful. It is waiting. Waiting for the next to believe too deeply, waiting for the next miracle to be mistaken for mercy, waiting for the veil to catch fire once more. And so the wind moves on, through broken towers, past burned chapels, into the hollows of another land, where an old monk walks barefoot, clutching a torn page that speaks of kings and stars. He mutters of salt and serpents. He walks toward a different throne. One not made of gold, but bones. A lantern swings in the dark throat of the mountain pass, not by the hand of a traveler, but by the wind's mournful breath. It creaks upon rusted iron, casting a trembling ring of light that dances across carvings long devoured by storm and ash. Beneath it, the stone waypost leans, half swallowed by snowdrift and time. Its sigil, a sun bound in chains, still clings to the surface like a memory that refuses to die. Tir El Mir. No map bears its name, no chronicler dares ink its fate. It lives only in the hushed superstitions of shepherds and old women who seal their doors when the moon bleeds red. But the path remains, winding upward into wind-scoured silence. The last road to a kingdom erased not by war, but by something stranger. They say it was the sky itself that turned against Tir El Mir. A red eclipse, vast and unnatural, cracked the heavens like an eye torn open in fury. The seas shifted. The tides came too high, and then never returned. Birds flew in spirals until they fell. On that night the sun did not rise. It trembled below the horizon, chained by something unseen. But before this omen, there was music. Arden the hollow-throated, last king of Tir El Mir, was not crowned by conquest but by voice. His singing, some said, could still storms or summon deer from their winter burrows. Others whispered he was not born of woman, but of song itself, given form by sorrow and salt. He ruled not with blade nor decree, but through melody. And his kingdom, nestled between the salt-crusted ridges and deep mines of the western teeth, thrived in eerie harmony. Then she arrived, the silver bride, sent from the eastern court beyond the amber dunes, across 7 river forks and a pact sealed in blood and bells. She came veiled, not in cloth, but in a gossamer shimmer like moonlight spun from spider threads. No one saw her eyes. None dared ask her name. In her hand, she carried a gift, a tall mirror, black as the ocean beneath stars, trimmed with runes so ancient they bent the candlelight. At first, it was treated as an ornament, a relic of Eastern vanity. But the mirror drank the room. No matter how they turned it, no matter how they veiled it in silk, it always faced the throne. And in it, things flickered, not reflections, but memories twisted and rewritten. Courtiers began to dream of things they had never lived. A boy woke crying, whispering in dead languages. A knight walked into the sea, smiling. Then came the blood, children crying tears red as rubies. The abbey's windows, once filled with holy glass, melted into the flagstones as if the stone itself wept. Birds fell from the rafters. Rats drowned themselves, and Arden, the singer-king, fell silent. His last song was never heard. Only the echo of its final note remained, humming through the salt tunnels like a dirge trapped in stone. Then, one morning, the gates of Tir El Mir's palace stood open. The sun rose, dim and unsure. No alarm was sounded. No bodies lay strewn, but no one remained. Long tables had been set, for feast or funeral, none could tell. Steam rose from platters of wild boar and honey-drizzled figs. Goblets overflowed with golden wine, but chairs sat empty. Torches burned unattended. No signs of struggle, no footprints in the snow. The wolves came first, drawn by the warmth and silence. They prowled the marble halls, drank from silver bowls, and snarled at their reflections in the cracked mirror beneath the dais. A mirror now shattered, but still pulsing with a faint, cold glow. Those who entered later did not stay long. One thief touched the glass and screamed not in pain, but confusion. He had forgotten his name, forgotten why he had come. His own brothers did not recognize him. He wandered into the snow, mumbling lullabies in Arden's voice. Tir El Mir did not fall. It recoiled, pulled into itself like a wound that rejects healing, like a breath held too long beneath black water. Time moved differently there. Clocks unraveled, bells rang backwards. The birds that returned bore feathers of glass and sang no songs. Now, when clouds gather low and the moon turns the color of rust, travelers near the old road swear they hear humming. A woman's voice, soft and endless. Beneath a canopy of moths, she sings in a tongue no longer spoken, her veil untouched by dust. The silver bride, they say, still waits, not for rescue, not for remorse, but for the next name to vanish. And somewhere, deep beneath the frozen banquet hall, where salt veins still glimmer in the dark, Ardan's throne sits untouched. The air there smells of honeyed wine, old iron, and memory. In the cracked mirror, shadows still move. The wind passes through the pass, carrying snow and a note of something else. A hum. The lantern flickers once more, then dies. Beyond the pass lies the next valley, further west, where old abbots speak of chained sons and vanished kings, where a different silence rules, not of forgetting, but of waiting. And beneath that silence, something stirs. The moon hangs yellow and swollen, like a sick eye watching the marshes breathe. Steam coils upward from the black waters of Elsweld, slow and serpentine, veiling what lies below in a shifting mask. Reeds hiss like whispers through broken teeth, bending in a rhythm no wind commands. Somewhere beneath the surface, a shape stirs. Something old, something forgotten. A lantern swings on a boat long untethered, caught in a loop of tide and memory, casting gold over the mire. It catches on the glint of something half buried, a crown, rusted and ringed with barnacle. Threads of fishnet cling to its once regal curve. Moss has woven it a new kingdom among the drowned. It is a relic of a vanished queen, of Rilwen the Pale. Her fortress palace once rose from this water like a blade from a sheath, carved from limestone that sang when rain touched it. Rilwen ruled not from land nor sea, but from the tide between. She was born during an eclipse and crowned under storm. The people whispered that the rivers listened to her dreams, and sometimes obeyed. They called her Omen-bearer, Tide Witch, Sea Mother. They sang of her hair like kelp in current, of her hands, always wet, as if the sea never left her. She wore pearls not as jewels, but as warnings. Her eyes were storm glass, clear until the drowning began. Elsweld was no ordinary realm. Its people lived on floating wharves and stilted homes, threading their days between fishbone and fog. Their voices echoed gull cries and the chant of waves. Children were taught to swim before they could walk. Feasts were laid on boats that rocked with every spoonful of eel stew, every blessing whispered in brine-salted breath. But in the year they named the drowned stars, the water betrayed them. It began subtly, a tide that did not retreat, a moon that tugged at the sea like a greedy child. Graves by the river's edge began to weep. Salt crept into bread. Babies came into the world coughing water, some with faint slits behind their ears. The priests whispered of imbalance. The omen-bearer did not blink. Rilwen stood barefoot in the rising flood, staring into its dark mirror. When her advisors begged her to leave, she bound herself instead. Chains, forged from the anchors of 100 ships, tethered her throne to the seabed. Her crown she cast into the marsh, saying, "If the river seeks dominion, let it rule my bones as well." The bells of the Tide Temple were unmoored and hurled into the deep, meant to soothe the spirits below. But the bells sang once, then were swallowed. The silence that followed was not absence, but waiting. The fog came next. Thick and impenetrable, it rolled in like prophecy. Boats returning from fishing vanished mid-river. Lights flickered and died, swallowed whole. And then, the palace itself was gone. One moment, its spires pierced the mist. The next, only water remained. There was no scream, no storm, just the quiet collapse of a kingdom. Now, only the marsh remembers. Fishermen still come near, though not too near. They mutter stories over rum and salted cod, of pulling up nets tangled not in seaweed, but in strands of pale hair, of silver combs caught in the mesh, of voices beneath the hull, singing lullabies in a tongue half forgotten. They say that when the moon is low, you can see lights flickering beneath the water. Not reflections, not tricks of fog, windows lit for a feast, long tables stretched with ghostly guests, cups raised in a toast that never ends. Music barely audible, like harps strung with bone. Some who hear it weep without knowing why. Others speak of seeing her, Queen Rilwen, walking just beneath the surface, veil trailing like seaweed, coral scepter in hand. Her eyes are blind now, but they turn toward you all the same, as though she's known your name since before your first breath. Children in nearby villages say that dreams of drowning come with the scent of brine and lilac, and that in the dream, a woman in white whispers, "It is not your time, yet." A scholar once dared to write that Elsfeld was a myth. He arrived with parchments and skepticism and left in the dead of night, mumbling nonsense, his boots filled with black water. You cannot map Elsfeld. The marsh shifts. Paths that lead in do not lead out. Trees move when you aren't watching, and sometimes you'll see a torch burning under the surface, steady and slow, as if someone walks below, never needing breath. It is said that the water here carries memory, not like a story, like a wound. You can taste it on your tongue. Regret, loss, devotion turned to ruin. A whole people who loved the tide so deeply they sank with it rather than flee. Rilwen waits still, not alive, not dead, bound by her vow and her crownless faith. The throne chained in silence, the kingdom suspended in a moment that never ends. She's not vengeful, she's not kind. She remembers. That is all. And in the stillness, when even the frogs fall silent, and the lantern light dims, and the reeds no longer shiver, if you dare to listen, you may hear her. Not a song, not a scream, but your name. Spoken by lips that have never touched air, in a place you have never been, but have always belonged. Elsfeld is not gone. It sleeps in brine and shadow, beneath your step, beneath your breath. And the tide is rising again. Morning frost clings to the ash-grey stones like the last breath of the dead. The wind winds through the pass that leads to Draythorn, no longer whistling, but singing, mournful and monastic, as if it remembers psalms once sung by hooded men whose bones now rest beneath collapsed cloisters. Each gust carries a note of grief, harmonizing with the silence that has blanketed this place for 100 years. Along the cracked causeway, broken law tablets lie discarded like fallen shields. One bears a serpent coiled tenderly around a lily, a symbol of devotion and poison entwined. Faded by storms and centuries, yet the stone still breathes it. A black dog waits at the ridge, unmoving, watching. Some say it is no creature of flesh but memory made manifest. A watcher born from guilt so old no name dares claim it. It does not bark, it does not move, but it knows, it remembers. Draythorn did not die with the sword. No battering ram breached her gates, no plague carried off her children in the night. She was hollowed out from within, a betrayal so slow it took generations to rot its roots. A curse fed not by venom, but by ink. King Edron the Quiet ruled in a time when silence was sacred. His court was a place of hush, of soft gestures and gloved intentions. Words held weight, and prophecy, once revered, had begun to crack the seams of the realm. For it was said that his queen, Elerith, wrote with a pen that bled truth before it happened. Her journals, bound in silver and midnight velvet, foretold misfortune with harrowing precision. A child drowned, a tower collapsed, a marriage turned to ash. Every whisper she set to parchment found its echo in the waking world. They called it a blessing, until it wasn't. When her own mind unraveled, when she began to write of fire swallowing the citadel and the rivers running backward, when she ceased to eat, to speak, and finally to breathe, her gift became a blight. Her last journal, left open upon her deathbed, described in ink the kingdom's end. And it was then that Idryn, stricken with grief and drowning in dread, made a decree etched into granite. Let no future be written. Let ink fall silent. The scribes, once saints with quills in place of swords, were branded heretics. They were dragged from abbeys and cloisters, tongues ripped from mouths that had only ever sung of what might be. Their ink pots were smashed, scrolls burned until the night skies filled with smoke shaped like screaming angels. And in every square where executions rang out, children whispered, "The ink remembers what the blood denies." But not all ink was spilled. In the belly of Draythorn, beneath the bones of the cathedral, where sunlight had never stepped, a single scroll remained, wrapped in lambskin, bound with a violet ribbon like the bruises that bloomed on the queen's wrists. It had no title, only a faint scent of lavender and old, wet stone. The monks tasked with guarding the vault swore, oaths sealed with ash. None dared read it. Some claimed they could hear it whispering through the parchment. Others dreamed of cities flooding with shadow. For a while, the silence held. Then the skies began to bruise. A sickly shade between storm cloud and wound spread above Draythorn. Moths, black as coals and soft as velvet, filled the chapels, nesting in the mouths of statues. Bells refused to ring. Cattle vanished from the fields, and beneath it all, a silence more terrible than any scream. It was then, and only then, that the scroll was found unbound, unrolled, open. Laid carefully upon the cathedral altar, though no monk would confess to breaking the seal. Some say it opened itself. That night, the castle doors locked from within, not slammed, not barred, but sealed, as though the stones themselves had decided to forget the world. By dawn, Draythorn was empty. No bodies, no signs of struggle, just wind where once were footsteps. The hearths still warm, bread left uneaten on wooden plates. The city's soul had dissolved, not into death, but into absence. The kind of vanishing that does not echo, now the ravens nest where banners once flew. They perch on broken balustrades, tearing meat from the memories of what was. A single candle still burns within the chapel, undisturbed by wind, weather, or time. It flickers, soft as breath. No hand has lit it. No hand dares snuff it out. Pilgrims come sometimes. Monks, relic hunters, fools chasing legends. But few return whole. Some speak of visions, of a queen dressed in violet, weeping ink tears into her own cupped hands. Others come back blind, their eyes white as lilies, whispering one word over and over again, remembers. Those who return say the scroll is still there, still open, still waiting, its final line etched like a wound across the page, deeper than any blade could carve. The ink remembers what the blood denies. A phrase that once haunted the mouths of dying scribes now lingers on stone and in dreams. It appears in strange places. Dew on grave markers, frost upon forgotten windows, patterns in spilled wine, and always near the symbol, the serpent and the lily, blooming through stone like memory clawing its way from beneath centuries of forgetting. Some say the symbol appears only for those with secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. Others believe it is a curse reborn each time truth is silenced. And there are those, the oldest, the quietest, who say Draythorn never truly vanished. That it waits, that somewhere behind those castle doors, sealed by ink and oath, the city breathes still. Frozen between one written word and the next, a kingdom held in suspension, caught between prophecy and its price. So when the wind wails low through the mountain pass and the dog lifts its head to stare at nothing, ask yourself, what would your blood deny, and what has your ink already remembered? The candle burns still, and the scroll waits for its next reader. Perhaps it is you. Perhaps you already have. A door hangs crooked on its rusted hinges, swaying ever so slightly. Not with the force of the wind, but as if in memory of it. The great hall of Ewenmere breathes in silence. Sunlight, amber and thick with age, falls in angled shafts, catching the dust in slow circling dances. The tapestries, or what remains of them, ripple in the still air like echoes of forgotten nobility. Once they told stories, swan-feathered maidens gliding across moonlit lakes, iron-hearted kings with brows heavy as stone. Now they hang like skin on bone, threadbare, brittle, weeping threads. A single goblet lies on its side, copper bronze and stained with wine long turned black. Not spilled in haste, but placed, perhaps, in offering. Near the hearth, where no fire has burned for a generation, rests the leather shoe of a child. Half-burned, tiny, the charred sole curls upward like a withered leaf. There are no footsteps here, only the hush. Ewenmere was never built to last by mortar or blade. It was a sanctuary, not for the mighty, but for the broken. The wounded came limping across the moors, dragging their sins behind them. The exiled wept at its borders, and the forest let them pass. Penitents carved prayers into their own skin, and the land read them like scripture. Its laws were never spoken in council chambers or etched in stone, but whispered on bones, animal, human, unknown, and buried beneath the roots of elder trees. Those who sought them did so barefoot, in silence, bleeding as they walked. Justice in Ewenmere was not enforced. It was felt. It was known. At its heart was Queen Anitha, a monarch draped not in gold, but in silence. Her presence could still a room like snowfall. Her veil, always blue, shimmered like dusk water, and none had seen her face since the day her brother died. Some said she mourned him. Others whispered that it was not death, but what she did to him, that she veiled from the world. She ruled not with proclamations, but with glances. A raised hand meant exile, a lowered gaze, forgiveness. Her court learned to read the tremor of fingers, the lift of a brow, the tilt of a chin. It was a language older than words, and far more binding. When the Red Riders came, they did not knock. Their horses left no hoof prints, their blades no clang. Their faces were masks of blank iron, polished to reflect only the terror of those who looked upon them, so villages burned without screams, monasteries bled out in silence. And still, they rode. But when they reached Ewenmere, something shifted. There were no armies waiting at the gates, no rallying horns. The people did not cry out. Instead, they gathered in the cathedral at the hill's crown, beneath its rose-glass window and its shattered bell. They held hands, children, mothers, monks, thieves. They closed their eyes and waited. The riders breached the gate. The crooked door moaned open, and then silence. A silence so deep it cracked the altar's stone. A silence so heavy it bent light. Some say Anitha stood among her people and spoke a single word. A word that was not a sound, but an unraveling, a severing of thread from time. Others say she placed her palm upon the cathedral floor and the earth swallowed them, quietly, completely. The Red Riders vanished, not slain, not turned back. Simply gone, like breath into frost. What remains of Ewenmere is not ruins, but reverence. Pilgrims still come, though the roads have long vanished beneath vines and moss. They don't come seeking treasure. They come seeking silence. They kneel in the dust of the hall and press their ears to the ground. And some hear voices. Not words exactly, but dreams. Dreams not their own, of blue veils fluttering in moonless dark, of hands joined in prayer beneath root and stone. The veil of Anatha still floats through the corridor on windless days. No breeze stirs it, no touch lifts it. Yet it moves, catching light that should not be there, brushing against stone with a softness that chills. Children speak of seeing her, not a ghost, but a shadow of choice. A figure in blue, her face hidden, watching them from doorways that don't exist. And always, always, the silence. Not empty, never empty. It is full, of memory, of mourning, of magic unspoken. Ewenmere did not fall, it retreated, not in fear, but in refusal. It chose not to fight, not to scream. It chose absence, disappearance, a deeper kind of resistance, the kind that cannot be broken because it does not seek to win. It hides, still, somewhere beneath forest and fog, somewhere beneath us. Some say that on certain nights, when the stars hang too still and the air carries no sound, you can feel it, like a heartbeat under the soil, a thrum in the roots, a breath. And in that breath is a question. What is strength, if not the will to disappear when the world demands a war? As we move forward, to lands where swords did clash and blood did spill, we will carry this silence with us. Like a veil, like a memory, because not all kingdoms rise with fire. Some vanish, to endure. There is a sound that does not belong to the sea, a hush more ancient than waves, a silence too deliberate to be nature's work. It dwells atop the cliffs of the grey wold, where Caer Braelyn clings to the rock like the ribs of some forgotten leviathan. Bones of a beast long dead, and yet not dead enough. The wind here does not howl, it sings, not with joy, but with memory. A song of drowned scrolls and shattered lenses, of ink spilled where blood should be. Beneath the weight of a grey sky, the ruins of Braelyn rise in defiance. Arches skeletal, windows empty, their black stone flaking salt like skin too long in the tide. And on storm-heavy nights, the watchers of nearby villages say torches flicker once more in its heights. That cloaked figures drift across the broken spires, and voices chant in tongues that do not taste like air, but of rust and roses. Core, the rise, ritual, and fall of a kingdom of scholars and storms. Braelyn was never meant to last, not because it was weak, no, but because it dared too much. They were not warriors. They built no walls. Instead, they raised towers of copper and glass to chase the heavens, wrote truths with wind-chapped fingers, and sealed them in skins of beasts long extinct. Theirs was a kingdom of star-watchers and storm-callers, a people who believed knowledge could anchor the unruly sky. They chose the cliff deliberately, where the sea smashed hardest, where lightning struck most. It was not madness, it was faith. Faith that the storm could be spoken to, measured, named. And at the heart of this faith, there was a queen, Merode, the ink-blooded. She did not wear a crown of gold, but bore constellations in scarred skin, each incision a vow, a calculation, a sacred alignment. She inked the rituals into herself until her veins pulsed black, not with poison, but with purpose. They say she walked into the tide on the eve of the longest night, robes dragging wet across the stone like mourning veils. She did not return with seaweed in her hair, but with eyes reflecting lightning before it struck. When she spoke, the wind hesitated, and then the sky broke open. 9 days, 9 nights, no sun, no star, only crackling fissures of light that never ceased. Rain fell in sheets so thick they blurred memory. And ships, great merchant ships, were found overturned on dry hills 100 miles inland. Not wrecked, placed. Panic did not take Braelyn, nor did prayer. Instead, the scholars gathered in the observatory, the great dome of brass and crystal that had once charted the breath of comets. Together they sealed the doors. No cry, no decree, no final lament. Just the click of ancient gears, the hiss of steam, and then nothing. Only silence. Then wind. Symbolic descent. The ruin that remains, and the lingering question. Now the stairs are gone. The halls open to sky. The scrolls lie damp and curling in corners where the sea breathes through broken glass. But the dome, that great bronzed eye watching the stars, still stands, untouched, unopened. Travelers speak of its door with unease, of waking with words on their tongues they do not understand, languages no longer spoken, but dreamed, their brows crusted with salt, their lungs heavy with ocean air. What did they find sealed behind that door? What equation, what name, what truth was too large to remain in the world? Perhaps they saw too far, understood too much. Perhaps the stars whispered back, and in doing so, unwrote them. Braylon was not destroyed. It was translated, shifted sideways into a language we cannot yet speak. They did not die. They became something else, and in that transformation, in that silence behind sealed brass, they left behind an invitation. Not a warning, not a curse, but a whisper in the salt wind. Come see. Come understand. Close, a haunting image, a door waiting, the sea remembering. The cliffs do not crumble, not fully. The sea tears at them year after year, but the stone resists, as if it too remembers, as if something still breathes beneath the ruin. Perhaps the sea protects what it loves. Perhaps the sky still mourns what it lost. And perhaps, when the wind shifts just so, when the fog wraps tight around the towers, you too will see the flicker of a torch behind glass that should have long shattered. The last door of Braylon still waits. The question is not what happened. The question is, would you go in if it opened? Because the sea remembers, and the stars still listen.